and so on in simple language. Now, these are assessments that have direct implications for how we train teachers, because I think it's not only that teachers need to know content, they also do need some very practical skills on how to deal with young children. And so, assessments like these can give us very concrete tips on how teacher training should be designed so as to build better foundations for our children in primary school. Last assumption, knowing theory. In India, often, we sit in class, we spend many years in classrooms, and we often think that knowing theory is enough to change practice. As part of our assessments of teachers, we both ask them questions about their attitudes and values as teachers, and we observe them teaching in classrooms. So when we ask them about things like the importance of child-friendly behaviors, about the importance of group work, about involving parents, and so on, they always knew what we wanted to hear, and so their self-reported answers were very, very prime. If you just looked at that data, you would be very happy with the teachers that we have. But then we also observed those same teachers in classrooms, and unfortunately, this is what we saw. So we identified 6 very simple indicators that we are calling child-friendly indicators. Of course, you could have many more indicators, much more complex, sophisticated ones. But even at this level of simplicity, the results are quite scary. So if you look at the first column, students ask teachers questions. If one single student asked the teacher one single question in 30 minutes, that was marked as a yes. So even then, 20% of these 1,700 or so classrooms, that this was observed in 20% of those classrooms. Students' work displayed in the classroom, again in 20-some%, very low proportion. Teachers smiling, laughing, or joking with students. This was just an indicator to see whether teachers had made any effort to put the children at ease, to establish some sort of a comfortable, easy, horizontal relationship with them, rather than the superior subordinate relationship that the minister was talking about this morning. Again, barely 1 in 5 classrooms was any attempt made to do this. Teacher using local information to make content relevant. So, well, teachers always do teach from textbooks, we know that. But in 1 out of 5 classrooms, the teacher made some effort to explain that content in terms that the children would understand, find relevant to their own daily lives. The 2 indicators that were most rarely observed, teacher has children work in small groups. This almost didn't happen ever, as you can see from this bar. And teacher uses TLM, any TLM other than the textbook, anything at all. And you can see that that proportion is about 10% of these 1,700 classrooms. So part of the problem is not that teachers don't know. As I said at the beginning, teachers do know that these things are important. I think that part of the problem is that they don't necessarily know how to implement these activities in the context of the children that they have in front of them. And the reason is that it is, as we saw at the beginning, a very complex situation with children of different ages, different learning levels, different grades in the same classroom. This is not simple to do. So just to, just as a postscript to that table, in 40% of these 1,700 classrooms, we did not observe even one of these 6 indicators, not one of these 6. So just to return for a moment to the assumptions that we started out with. As you can see, many of the things we think of when we think of a typical standard 2 or standard 3 or any classroom in a primary school are just not true on the ground. Of the list of characteristics that I listed at the beginning, there are only 2 here that are likely to be true in most primary schools in the country. One is that the teacher is most likely teaching in a classroom because of a huge push made by the government of India to expand infrastructure. There are classrooms and schools available within a kilometer of every habitation in the country. The other is that teachers do teach using the textbook. So those 2 assumptions are certainly true. Every single other assumption on this page is not true according to the considerable amount of evidence that we have today. The one assumption that I didn't talk about is the fact that, here we assume that children are present in the classroom, but data tells us that being enrolled in school does not mean that children are present. In fact, the All India number for attendance is about 70%, and even that varies hugely across states. So we have states with an average of maybe 50% attendance, and states that have an attendance average of over 90. So there's a huge variety. Just to wrap up, we know from the literature and from Vinita's presentation right just before me, what are the sorts of objectives that we should aim to provide? What are the sorts of characteristics that we should aim to provide? What are the sorts of spaces, schools, and preschools that we should aim to provide to our children? But I think that it's equally, if not more important, to start out by thinking about what are the characteristics of the people in those institutions. And in this case, since I'm talking about schools, we're talking about children, and we're talking about teachers. So if we design our policies based on these assumptions, then it's going to be more business as usual, and we are not going to get the changes that we're looking for. We need to design policies that are based on the realities of the schools, of the children, of the students, and of the parents that we have today. So what does this mean? First, start from where the children are today, not where we expect them to be. And for starters, I think what that means is to do away with this age grade system that we have in our heads. We can see already that this system is not working in the schools that we have today. In a given grade, children are not of the age that they're supposed to be. It's not clear what purpose it serves to continue with this age grade structure when it's not serving the needs of the students. It's certainly not serving the needs of the teachers. So, I think it is time to revisit this. There are many ways in which this can be done, but we need to design policies based on where children are, not where the fact that at 6 years old, they ought to be in standard 1, and so on. We need to start from where the teachers are and not where we expect them to be. And this, I think, has a lot to do with exposing future teachers to the realities of the classrooms that they will be teaching in. So, for example, Pratham currently has a very interesting collaboration with the District Institutes of Education and Training, the DIETs, in 75 or so districts across the country, where we take DIET students to actual primary school classrooms. We have them do an assessment of basic learning. We have them think about what that means in terms of what these children can and cannot do. And then we show them ways in which they can work with these different groups of children to bring them up to a basic level of reading and math ability in a relatively short period of time. And this is something they practice during their teaching practice days. Now, I'm not saying that Pratham's model is the only way to do this. Of course, there are many ways in which they can do this. And teacher training institutions have training days where future teachers are supposed to go out and practice teaching. But if, as part of those practice teaching days, they could be exposed to thinking about who are the people in the schools that they're going to be teaching. Who are these children? Who are these teachers? And where are they at? And how should I change my practice depending on who these children are? I think that would be a huge, huge step forward. Third, start from where the parents are, not from where we wish they are. So this is, as I was saying a few moments ago, we need to think about strategies for communicating with and involving parents in schooling, in education, in thinking about quality. And there are many ways and many examples of how to do that. And some of these I think we will be hearing about tomorrow. But until we involve parents in this conversation and not keep it as a conversation that is between experts in the field of education and teachers, I think until we do engage broader society, parents and community members, we will not achieve the outcomes that we want. And finally, it's very important to use evidence as a basis for policy. We have a lot of it today in this country, and I think that we could very usefully use it to think about, if we know where we want to get to, the evidence tells us where we are starting from, and if we design our strategies for getting to our objectives based on where we are at today, I think we have a good chance of achieving them in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suman. I think there are very many very thoughtful issues that are coming out of the assumptions that influence teaching learning, as has been found by the studies conducted by Dr. Suman. And I think during the discussion, I will be able to raise some of those issues for better understanding. My third speaker is Dr. Annie Koshi. Dr. Annie Koshi is principal of St. Mary's School. She did her graduation and post-graduation in English Honours from Lady Sri Ram College, Delhi. She completed her B.Ed at CIE Delhi University and MA in Educational Management from Oxford Brookes, UK. She completed her PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT New Delhi. Dr. Koshi actively advocates the cause of the disabled and has worked hard to create an inclusive school. She is a member of the State Advisory Council constituted by the NCT of Delhi to advise the government on implementation of provisions of the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act. She is also a member of Departmental Advisory Board, Department of Education of Groups with Special Needs, NCERT. She has received the prestigious National Award for Teachers conferred by the MHRD, Government of India, National Child Care Award, India Development Education Award, and the Freelance Journalists and Writers Association Award. Dr. Koshi has authored various books and writes poetry. She is dealing with an issue which is of equal concern to preschool education, and that is the issue which is concerned with inclusive practices in education. I invite Dr. Koshi.
I thought since we are dealing with little children and since so many of us are sort of sleeping, then maybe we could all stand up and do some breathing exercise. Would you like to do that? Just stand up for a minute and just do 2 breathe-ins, as we say. So we say breathe in to a count of 2 and then breathe out to a count of 4, okay? So breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in again. Breathe out. That's lovely. You can sit down.
We all listen to the teacher.
You have to have the right tone also, if you have to listen to us. Okay, good afternoon. Talking about inclusive education. And we've already had 2 speakers who've talked about the importance of teacher and importance of centeredness, and which is why I thought we'd do some breathing, is that it's so important to be centered in what we need to do in school, in classroom. And what centeredness actually does is to get you to focus on the child in front of you. Okay? And if you're focusing on that child, because what is inclusive education? And this is what we have found. I think it was Scott Hamilton who said that the only disability is a bad attitude. And is that bad attitude actually with our teachers and not with the child? So in the social model of inclusion or disability, actually disability is socially created. It's not like the disability that is the medical model where you say, oh, he is in a particular category and so he is challenged. But if it's socially created, and in education, largely disability is a social construct. So you have a classroom, you have seats, you have to sit down, you have to do a timed written paper. And so let me do school readiness to give you a pencil and paper and start you to write, because that's what you got to do. But then there you have the child who's not sitting down to write. So then what actually happens with children is something that can be. So I'm going to sort of do a little bit of theory in the beginning and then sort of take you through some activities that are in the school that would give you. Suman just said, what you see in classroom is not necessarily what you get. I would like you to look at some classrooms and see do you get anything out of it, okay? So in fact, this particular drawing, if you see when we talk to children about rights, and when it comes to say Constitution of India and Republic Day, then we say rights hai, or if rights, we talk about rights and then we say ab likho rights kya hai. So then obviously this child has written sab bachon ke paas mummy papa hone chahiye. Huh? So that's a big right that should be there, and so this is what it is. So accessibility does not make inclusion. So right to education says 25% admission of children of disadvantaged groups. But just admitting them, does that actually give you, give you that kind of quality education that is envisaged, an equal quality education that is envisaged? No, it does not. So we do believe that accessibility is not inclusion. But definitely, one is looking at making sure that there's a diverse peer group in the class. So then your admission policies are very, very important. So as a neighborhood school, we make sure that we take children from the neighborhood as close as possible, as diverse as possible, both in terms of socioeconomic groups as well as in terms of challenges and other area. And then, because it's very necessary for the child to mix with his peer and learn to respect and understand. So these are core concepts. So to come to the concept of care, we talked about centeredness, and then there's the concept of care. Care, is a word that perhaps, if we really think about, if I'm saying that I have to be caring, what does that mean, to be caring? To be able to see someone and to say, okay, he or she looks disturbed today. Or to see and say, but I didn't see him for the last 2 days. What could be the problem there? Or he's not coming with his tiffin. Or, he's looking at other kids' tiffin and the mother keeps sending him this bread and butter and jam while the others are getting perhaps, finger chips or Maggie. I'm not sort of advocating those are great things, but kids like it. And so does the mother actually move around his tiffin? So I'm saying care means that I'm looking, I'm listening, I'm then also reacting, or if that's not maybe a great word, but then I'm actually filling the gap. Okay? So if you look at these 3 pictures that are up there, so that's a 3+, and you see, look at his concept of self there, and he moves to 4+, there's a little bit more of me there, and then as he moves to 5+, he has more of a sense of self. Okay, so when I talk about inclusion and I talk about family, so this is what I consider as family.
You're going to school, so let's all walk to school, chalo. It's all right.
sec.
You're driving a car. And how many
Yeah,
people
आपको-
inside the car?
Okay. So how do I? Oh, great. So, what they think of as family. How do they build the family? What is the opportunities you give them to build family, to build understanding with each other? हम जा रहे हैं, हम 5 हैं, हम स्कूल जा रहे हैं. अच्छा, तो इससे मैं ज़रूर समझ सकती हूँ कि स्कूल मज़ा है, हम जा सकते हैं, But if I'm not going to have that, then what would it be? So we have a 3-phase approach in school, and the first phase is to understand the family and child. Okay, so when they come for admission, we would actually meet the parents and the child to understand how exactly the family is placed, what are the needs of the child, and then in the second phase, we assess the strengths and needs in class and fix what the child would need as a one-to-one. Okay, now let me tell you this, that in the inclusive school, the child is in the class with everybody else. Okay, he's not in a separate section. But in preschool or in the readiness program, he is taken periodically into a special needs class, and I will show you something in that. A situation where he gets a one-to-one to reinforce or to help him overcome the little bumps that he may be facing in various areas. Okay? And then, so that's what I mean, that you will assess the strengths and needs in class to fix one-to-one, but you're not interfering in the relationship between child and teacher. Okay, so the teacher and child in classroom continues. And the third phase is when we would share these observations with the parent, because the parent has to also reinforce. This is not particular for special needs children. I mean, we know that all children need all this kind of thing. Okay, so this is I've said we are still learning, because I believe inclusion is not a goal, a point that you reach, but you're in the process all the time. These various areas, of course, have to be mentioned, and it's centered around the child, the family, and the community. Okay, so so if I were to show you something, how we would actually work on the socio emotional development.
Are you taking impression of the bark?
This is
What
a
tree is
special
this?
needs child.
What tree is this? Gooseberry tree. Are you enjoying this? Huh? Yes or no? Yes. Show me your impression. Show it to me. Show it to Nisha ma'am. Finish. Show it to Nisha ma'am. Very good. Wow.
Okay, so that was what a child with special needs was doing, and if I were to show you what other children were doing at the
क्या दिख रहा है आपको? चीटी दिख रही है आपको? और क्या क्या दिख रहा है? टू चीटी आ गई। और एरोन, आपको कितना चीटी दिख रहा है?
So Aaron doesn't want to actually tell you how many. But I'm just trying to say that, you make an adaptation for a child depending on how he or she would like to do the same kind of activity of, bonding with nature. Okay, so we have playstations in free play. So this is, of course, one in which they are, please see how they're pretending to play and what they do. This, of course, is common in most preschools. But I'm just bringing it up to tell you how that development takes place over the various years. Okay, so here again, can I show you this one?
So Vinayak, what are you making? Photo frame. And where did you bring all these things from?